Blau's already fine.
Well, it's just kind of sort of dry. We sort of match.
I noticed that too. Surprise!
Fancy, yeah. All right, I'm gonna slate right here. All right, pre-concert talk, take one. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Robert White. I'm one of the trumpet professors here in the School of Music at Western Michigan University, and I'm joined by two very special guests who are helping me present our recital tonight. Say hello to my colleagues Yu-Lien and Henning Schroeder.
Hi.
There's thunderous applause going on right now.
Hi.
I can hear it in my heart.
Well, yeah, so we're presenting this recital tonight as part of the Dalton Wednesday series, and it's been a bit of time since we last all did a normal concert like this, so I thought it might be interesting to chat for a few minutes about our own histories with each other as performers, but also as alumni and teachers here in the School of Music at Western. So a lot of people know, I've already mentioned on a number of these pre-concert talks that I got my bachelor's degree in music education here way back in the 1990s. But not long after me, the two of you wound up on campus. Can you tell us a little bit about your history here at Western? How about Yu-Lien? We'll start with you.
Yeah, because I came here first. I came here in '99, so I fully only intended to come here sort of for an exchange for 1 year. I knew Lori Sims, who's now my colleague, from Hanover. We studied with the same teacher, and so I thought it would be a great idea to just so I'm originally from Germany, so I thought it would be a great idea to just come to the States and just be here for a year and find myself and, study and everything. And so, yeah, I really originally only planned on coming for a year. So I entered the master's program with an assistantship, and then I fully intended to, and then I finished my studies actually in Germany, but I liked it so much I came back, and I brought Henning with me, so that's how this happened. And so I sort of naturally just kind of I got my first position at Western actually as resident artist, and so I was accompanying a lot of people and teaching a little bit, and then moved on to get my doctorate, and then came back when this new position opened up, and that was in 2017. And I think that's when we first met. One of the pieces that we're going to play tonight is actually one of my interview pieces. So that brought back good memories. So, so this is sort of my little story here with Western.
Henning, what about you?
Well, you heard part of my answer already, because Yu-Lien and I had just started dating before she came to the States, and so she was gone and came back to Germany. And when she decided to come back here again to Western, I had visited her in her first year here, and I took some lessons with the then saxophone professor here, Trent Kinniston, and I decided in 2001 maybe to come back with Yu-Lien, and it was for the same reason. I mean, obviously I wanted to be here with Yu-Lien, but also I wanted to have this experience abroad. And so I came here for 1 year. I felt like I had unfinished business in Germany because I wanted to get some degrees from over there still that I had been working on. And so I went back, finished that for a year. Then and then I went to Indonesia for a couple of years because I was offered a teaching job at a university in Jakarta, and I did that for a couple of years while I continued to work on my terminal degree in Berlin. And after those 2 years, I came back to Kalamazoo. So I've been here now since 2005, I believe. Yeah.
And both of you had some time between stints at Western, as you described. I know Yu-Lien spent some time with the Bowling Green State University School of Music, and Henning, you were at Ohio Northern University just up until last year even. You were doing the the sort of heroic commute between these two locales. But now we've got you both settled here in Kalamazoo for good, so that's great. And as Yu-Lien mentioned, when she interviewed for the piano position here, one of the things the search committee did was put together a program, I guess you'd say, of accompanied repertoire to present, as well as solo repertoire of the person's choosing. And I felt pretty funny because Laurie Sims came to me and asked me if I would do something for these candidates, and I was like, yeah, sure. And I thought of this piece, the Suderberg Chamber Music 7, because I had performed it in recitals before, and I knew it had a pretty complicated and involved piano part. But then I found out that the other thing on the required repertoire was from Dichterliebe by Robert Schumann with Karl Ratner. So, as a trumpet player, we always have imposter syndrome when it comes to our repertoire. So one of the greatest art song collections of all time, up against this, I felt a little bit weird. But but I think Yu-Lien would admit that there's probably more notes in my piece than in the Schumann, right? So
that one.
There's that going for it, at least. So
yeah, that one definitely got me like sweating a little bit. So I received the music a week before my interview, and so I think that's kind of the point, to see sort of how quickly you can put this together. And we didn't have a lot of rehearsal time back then. We had like 15 minutes or something.
Yeah, the day of.
To just put together one movement, and so fortunately we have a little bit more time this time around, and I was like, yeah, this really feels much more comfortable. Yeah. But I think that was sort of the point, to just kind of see how you operate under pressure. And I'm a good faker, so I think that plays to my advantage. I'm trying not to fake as much tonight, so we'll see how this is going.
It seems to me like all the notes are there, so that's good,
Well, again, I'm a good faker, so no, I try. I had more time with this, and this is good, and it's been interesting to just kind of come back to it after, because we haven't played it since then, and so
that's right. Yeah.
So it's kind of been a while, and to just kind of come back to it under these different circumstances definitely made me learn it differently. So that's been kind of really fun. And I think the interesting thing is just also because of the way, I wish I had the score here right now, the way the print is not sort of a usual,
it sort of
has sort of more manuscript feel to it. And so somehow we get so locked in with like how things look visually, and so that's sort of an added complication. And also I think at first, on the first listen, it feels much more disjunct at first. And so I think for us to actually have this time to put this together, I'm realizing more connections and more call outs and actually really beautiful lines in there that maybe in the first read through, because in my panic, I was just like trying to just hang in there. So it's been kind of nice to just kind of really kind of just detect these like hidden lines and colors, and so that's been kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a very colorful piece for sure. And the composer Robert Suderberg is not somebody that a lot of people are too familiar with. He was obviously a very active composer for a period of time, but later in his career, I believe he became an artistic administrator, like a university administrator. And as we all know, that's a bit of a devil's bargain, right? You make a lot more money, but you also have to, you have to work a lot more. So there's a lot more spinning plates to keep track of. So I have to wonder if that affected his output. But this piece, it's interesting. It's called Ceremonies for Trumpet and Piano, and it's also under the bigger heading Chamber Music 7. He wrote a whole series of pieces that he called chamber music, and some of them were more obviously chamber music, like brass quintet, for example. But this trumpet and piano, it's not always thought of as a chamber ensemble, right? But, I'm sort of curious to, as you've played it, as you've come to it as a pianist, what about it seems like chamber music to you more than accompanying,
I think, as I mentioned, there are all these different colors and lines that I'm sort of finding out, and I think the complication in this piece for me is a little bit, it leaps around quite a bit, and I think that at first that sort of gave me this feeling of it's kind of disjunct, but I think it's almost like it's orchestrated in a way so that the piano fills the role of several instruments. That's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. Because it's kind of actually, the texture is kind of like complex a little bit. It has these different lengths going on at the same time. And I think that's sort of, so for me, that gives it sort of more of a chamber music feel if we look at chamber music beyond just two, people playing together, it's kind of a larger ensemble. So I just feel like it's almost like my part is filling several parts at the same time, which again makes it really colorful, but also really complicated in learning it. And in some ways, it actually feels not quite pianistic because it just bounces around quite a bit.
It's interesting. There's so much of that kind of like mallet percussion sort of thing to it. It almost reminds me of like marimba music or something at times. Yeah. But the effect, I think, for the listener is actually one that's very sustained, very linear. So it's kind of cool in that way, But yeah, since your audition here, we've never had a chance to perform it. So this is the first time we're doing the whole piece together. Yeah. In contrast to that, the piece I'm playing with your husband, Henning, is one we played together, I guess it was the fall of 2019. Is that right, Henning? Maybe it's the fall of 2019.
If I trust my reads at all, I have the date of the reads that I used then.
Oh, look at that.
It would have been 2018.
Okay.
It would have been 2018.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, and I trust your reads implicitly, so.
That is that long.
But that piece, Ghost Dialogue.
It's good to have an archive. I don't have the best memory myself, but I do write dates on my reads.
Yeah, you can trust the archive of the beats to tell us. That's great. But we did it as a part of a concert put on by the Detroit Chamber Winds and Strings. That's an outfit that I'm involved with over on the other side of the state. And we did what was called, it was part of their series that's called Structurally Sound. And they do programs in different kinds of venues. And this venue was actually an old house. It was an old mansion that's now owned by Wayne State University. And the idea is we would just play like in the house. We had the option of going to various places in the house or things like that. What struck me when I went to the venue to look at it for the first time, a couple months before the program, was it felt haunted to me. So my idea behind the programming was sort of geared towards haunted houses and ghost stories and things like that. And the piece we're playing is called Ghost Dialogues by Lance Holm. Henning was gracious enough to be able to play that concert with me. Yu-Lien sadly was not available, so I had to get someone else to play the piano, but Henning drove over and played that concert with me. But, another interesting bit of history about that piece is that it was premiered in 1994 at an International Trumpet Guild conference. And guess who the premier performers were? Anybody know? Tell me, Henning.
Well, my part, the tenor saxophone part, was played by my former teacher, Trent Kinniston.
That's right.
The saxophone. Here.
Your Wi-Fi is dropping out just a little bit. But
Bob, your part was played by.
That was
I think there's a and the trumpet was performed by.
It was Steve Jones.
I think I'm a little bit delayed here.
A little bit.
Yes.
Steve Jones, my predecessor here in the School of Music and a former teacher of mine from when I was a student, he played that premiere too. And I was at that Trumpet Guild conference. It was taking place at the University of Illinois, if memory serves. And I heard them premiere the piece, and it made a really strong impression at the time. It's, well, I'll let you talk a little bit about the piece too, Henning. How does it strike you as you learned it? how would you describe it to people that are coming at it fresh?
Well, obviously it has, as you say, in the use of of the title "Ghost Dialogues" has a reason. It stems from the theater, from actual theatrical dramas and plays that have dialogues involving ghosts, and each movement is from a certain play, a particular scene that is then interpreted musically. And this is also a piece of chamber music, and that it is a duo between trumpet and tenor saxophone. And you can look at this as a conversation between the two instruments. Two wind instruments that have very distinct colors that are very different. And I think um, um, that I think is kind of like an interesting juxtaposition. I think you and I both, we play in most of our chamber music activities are in homogeneous ensembles. So you are, of course, very active with a brass quintet, and I'm very active as a musician in a saxophone quartet. And so I'm used to making music with other saxophones, and you're used to making music with other brass players. And there are different challenges that come with playing with an instrument that has a different way of producing a sound, a different way of different intonation tendencies, and all of those things. And I find that very intriguing, that technical aspect of it. But I also like the idea of the two distinct voices coming together in this form of the dialogue.
Yeah, that's well put. You know, what's interesting about it to me is it's probably the most modernist piece that we have on this program. The language is not not as clearly tonal as the other pieces I'm playing. You know, there's a bit more use of dissonance in an expressive way. But what's also interesting is that metrically things are laid out like very, very specifically in a lot of ways. But the more prescriptions on what to do rhythmically that there are, quite frankly, the more chaotic it sounds, right? I mean,
That's true.
there's a lot of controlled chaos in that things will sound like they're completely in separate worlds, and then all of the sudden they just unify on some unexpected point, and it's really kind of cool. I mean, it really shows how far this composer Lance Holmes' craftsmanship is in putting this together. I think.
Yeah, and it's very intricate in that particular way, and yet some more like traditional or even folk elements kind of come through. There's this kind of waltz that we're playing that has kind of like a folk music vibe to it, and that kind of emerges out of that otherwise kind of chaotic texture, and it's a really nice contrast.
Yeah. And the references that you mentioned before are kind of interesting. The first movement references Hamlet and Hamlet's dialogue with the ghost of his father right near the beginning of the play, and the ghost's words in that point are "Adieu, remember me," and there's that sort of trailing off aspect. And the third movement has a similar vein, I think, in that it comes from the character of Emily in Thornton Wilder's Our Town, who is sort of observing things after she's already died tragically at the end of the play. And both of those have this kind of trailing off aspect, this sort of like, this sense of like evaporating from the world. And I think the use of the tenor saxophone is so genius there because the ability of the instrument to play like below the threshold of audibility is really something unique, especially in that register that he's written for you and on the tenor specifically. It just has a quality that I think is unique among the saxophones and also unique among most other instruments. So, and it's kind of cool to
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, and
Yeah,
you're
it has this
mastering
really
the instrument that lets that come through. So,
right.
not every saxophonist can pull that off. So.
Oh no, they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's got this kind of eerie quality to it. How the ends of the movements, they kind of like fade out that way. I like the image of evaporation there. That's really nice.
And the middle movement is sort of alluding to Don Giovanni, the opera by Mozart, where the commendatore, the deceased war general, comes back for an ominous visit, and you know the presence of the ghost in that setting has a much more troublesome implication for the characters. It's much more stressful. But anyway, now I mentioned that Henning and I played that concert in Detroit where we played that piece, and another work that we're doing, the Enesco Legend. That's sort of a classic, Paris Conservatory trumpet and piano type piece. But Yu-Lien, you've played a number of those conservatory works for other wind instruments and stuff. How would you say the piano's role in the Enesco stacks up against some of those?
It's interesting because this one is actually quite what's the word? I mean, most of these Paris Conservatory pieces have sort of this virtuosic flair, right? And that one is actually quite what's the word? I mean, it's a slow, lyrical. It's dramatic, but the drama comes more from big chords and kind of tension in that, in the dissonances, sort of, and it is actually quite unvirtuosic in that way, at least for piano. You have some parts there that are a little bit more, but so that is interesting. Yeah, I think actually kind of the dissonances in there that I found really really late romantic, basically, right? Yeah, I find those leaning into those is just kind of fun. And yeah,
it's interesting, that Enesco, again, it's not a composer that too many people are super familiar with, but he's somebody who definitely has a foothold, I would say, in the canon. But the harmonic writing of this doesn't really sound like anybody else to me. There's moments that remind me of Debussy a little bit, or looking forward to that kind of an impressionistic thing. There's certainly a high level of chromaticism, and you can detect the whole lineage of German Romantic music, I think, going through it. But there are just some really striking moments that you're hearing sounds that you don't really hear in anything else, I think. But it's a great piece, and to get to play it with a great pianist is a real treat. I mean, as you mentioned, there's a few flashy moments for the trumpet, but it's meant to be able to be played by a good student of the trumpet, And in fact, I have 6 students in my studio giving recitals this year, and 3 of them are playing the same piece. So I may have bitten off more than I can chew by programming it, because I had a thought of I'll show you how I do it, but now I can't put pressure on them to some of them are going to play it better than I'm playing it at times.
Oh, but isn't that what we want as teachers? It's
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
you're doing just fine. No, you sound beautiful.
It's put our egos aside and let our students.
Right. No, you sound amazing. I'm really excited to play with you. So.
Well, it's a great chance to get to do this, and even in the midst of all of the craziness of the past year, I think just having a chance to sort of grasp normalcy to whatever extent we can and do something. So I guess to wrap up, I'll just mention these piezas andaluzas that we're playing, these Spanish works by Santiago Baez. These are ones that you and I played before. In fact, I just got a Facebook memory that says it was 3 years ago today that we made a little tour.
Oh, that's right.
We went to Indiana University, the University of Kentucky, Northern Kentucky University, and we sort of presented a recital. And these Spanish pieces are the ones that we closed that program with. And I think, you'd have to concede that these don't sound like anything else on the program either, do they? I mean, This is much more of a, I don't know. I don't want to call it crossover music because that makes it sound trite or cheesy, but I think they're definitely very accessible, and I think that they have a lot of charm for even for people who don't think they like classical music very much. I think that they have a lot to offer.
Well,
What
like
was
the
it
kind
like?
of, I'm not even sure. Yeah, I mean, I think they sort of, yeah, sort of. You're right. They sort of escape a little bit like a categorization, in some ways. I they're they're just really fun. They have, I mean, as you would expect in Spanish music, like very like typical like Spanish rhythms.
Yeah,
Um, there's sort of like hints of like guitar imitations that I
yeah,
think you can hear. Um, I think harmonically, definitely, you can sort of hear their origins. But there's some like the not but I mean they're like the slow movements are just really lovely. They have like beautiful melodies, and yeah, I think they actually kind of explore the whole range of emotions,
yeah,
and yeah, they're super fun to play. I think it's I'm kind of happy to come back to them. And
yeah.
in fact, you have mentioned that they haven't been recorded yet, so it's been kind of like an interesting journey to just kind of find your own way through these, right? And figure this out together. And well, who knows? Maybe
Yeah,
we'll
maybe
be,
we'll get them recorded.
exactly.
There's a number of Spanish trumpet soloists that are well known, worldwide, and one of them has performed the first movement of these on a number of recitals that I've seen, but I still haven't seen a commercial recording of all of them, and I do think it's a worthwhile project. But for Spanish speakers who are watching it, and if you see the program, you'll probably notice a lot of wordplay in the titles too. Like the second movement is called Medianoche Circular, which means circular midnight, or if you want to think of it more like in a jazz context, round midnight, right? So, there's no quotes from that famous Thelonious Monk tune in it that I can perceive, but it sort of creates that world, that evocation of it. So, but they're great fun to play, and I'm really happy to be doing them with you. And I can't thank both of you enough for agreeing to do this.
Of
It's a
course.
stressful time of year, and even without tons of gigs, there's a lot going on, and so we've all had to dig pretty deep to get the energy to prepare this program. I think so. It'll be fun to present it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's nice to just kind of be reminded why we do this, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Also, just kind of what you said earlier, just like what I tell my students now, I have to
Yeah.
do it myself. So this is always good. So it's been nice to just kind of come back and prepare this, and it's been a ton of fun working
Yeah.
with you. So
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
thanks again.
I agree.
It's great to be able to collaborate with you both. And a husband and wife team makes it easy too, because I can just go over to your house and rehearse with both of you. So
True.
it works out well. But
as long as we don't play together, he and I. Just kidding.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh, no. Let's not do that.
Okay.
Well, thanks again to both of you for joining me, and
Of
thanks
course.
for all of you tuning in. And we hope you enjoy the program.
so much. Thanks to everyone who made it out tonight. We actually do have a small audience here, the size that's allowed, but it's nice to come out to applause, you know. It's been about a year, so get hungry for it, I guess. And special thanks too to all the people tuning in on the live stream, or if you're watching this in the future. I always like talking to people in the future, so that's cool. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the music we're playing tonight. That first piece, Chamber Music 7 by Robert Suderberg, which he called Ceremonies for Trumpet and Piano. Suderberg was one of sort of a crop of composers that around the mid-1970s, some of them were students of George Rochberg and others, who decided to sort of abandon serialist techniques, whether those were, you know, tonal serialism, 12-tone music, or the sort of total serialism that you might see in the music of someone like Milton Babbitt or something like that, in favor of a return to romanticism, you know, emotional, expressive, sentimental even music. But because it's, you know, from the middle of the 20th century, or late 20th century, there's a lot of other cool techniques in the air and sounds in the air. And you probably noticed at the beginning of the first movement of that piece and the second movement, I was playing into the piano to let the piano strings resonate like a giant harp. And it's kind of cool. In the second movement, he actually tells you to play the natural overtones. So like, you know, the seventh of the chord, for example, was naturally very, very flat, unlike on a piano where everything's tuned equally. But that super flat note sort of agitates and excites all the strings in the piano, so you get this wild kind of hum. I also say that just to let you know that those out-of-tune notes were completely intentional. And I'm sure my students will check out the live stream later and count all the unintentional out-of-tune notes that I played too. So have at it. Anyway, the next piece that we're going to play is kind of a staple of the trumpet and piano repertoire, and for good reason. The Legend by George Enesco. Enesco was a Romanian composer in the late, you know, sort of at the very end of the Romantic era. So in addition to sort of German chromatic romanticism, you're also going to hear some moments that sound a little bit like Debussy, coloristic moments like that. But I have a, you know, a fond connection to this piece. I actually played this piece when I was a student here for one of my recitals way, way back when. Through no fault of my own, 4 of my students who are giving recitals this year are playing this piece. And I actually also played it for my interview here when I was given the job here. This is one of the pieces I played on that recital. The Suderberg also has a cool connection in that I played that with Yu-Lien when she interviewed for her position here. It was one of the sort of here, learn this in a week kind of pieces that they threw at all of the candidates for that job, you know, to see how ready and able they were as accompanists. Yu-Lien had been a student here and then later a staff accompanist too, so I think all of us knew she was a great accompanist, but she still proved her mettle with that piece for sure. Anyway, so without further ado, we hope you enjoy Enesco's Legend. first I'll say that, you know, one of the coolest things about being a university professor is that I have colleagues that I'm friends with, and we get to collaborate on creative projects like this. I don't know if my colleagues in the sciences or engineering or whatever, you know, hang out with their friends and do fun stuff like, you know, research data tables or whatever the heck they do, I don't know. But we get to actually play music together. And, you know, a really cool part of the School of Music hiring Dr. Tay a few years ago is we got a package deal. She came with a saxophone playing husband, who's also an amazing teacher and performer. Henning Schroeder's an amazing player, and he and I played this next piece, this Ghost Dialogues, a couple of years ago in Detroit. One of the groups I play with a lot is the Detroit Chamberwinds, and they put on a special concert in a sort of a weird venue, like a non-traditional venue, and it happened to be this old sort of, well, I don't know, how would you describe it? Moldering? I don't know. It was a sort of spooky mansion, yes, right, in Midtown Detroit, and we played a concert there. And so my thought was to sort of build the musical selections around haunted houses and ghost stories and stuff like that. And so this piece called Ghost Dialogues came to mind. Now, this piece was commissioned by the, well, actually it was a competition winner for the International Trumpet Guild back in the mid-90s. And I heard it premiered at a conference when I was a student by my predecessor here at Western, Steve Jones, and one of Henning's former teachers, Trent Kinniston. They actually played the premiere of this piece. And I remember being pretty captivated by it at the time. It's by far the most modernist piece that we're playing on the program tonight. I don't know if Lance Holm would appreciate me attaching that word to his music or not, but it's the least tonal, so there's that. But you're going to hear all kinds of sort of fantastic textures and interplays. There's a lot of complexity with the rhythm and things like this. But it's also a very evocative piece because it uses these scenes from theater in which a ghost is actually talking to one of the characters in the play. The first movement comes from very near the beginning, actually it's near the end of Act 1 in Hamlet, where Hamlet is talking to his father's ghost. The ghost has appeared earlier in the play. He appears right in the first scene and scares the crap out of some guards. But he shows up to talk to Hamlet and basically starts to hatch the plot in Hamlet's mind that he needs to avenge his father's death. So he says, you know, adieu, remember me, as he sort of fades away, evaporates. And then the second movement is based on the scene near the end of Don Giovanni, near the end of Act 2 of Don Giovanni, where the ghost of the commendatore that he sort of made fun of and, you know, fooled around with his daughter and all this kind of stuff during the opera, he sort of jokingly invites the statue of this dead military figure to dinner. Well, lo and behold, the statue shows up to dinner, and he says, what does he say, honey? Help me out here. He says, dammi la mano impegno. It means, give me your hand in pledge. It means you're going to show up to dinner at my place. That's what the statue tells Don Giovanni. And if you don't know the opera, it doesn't end well for Don Giovanni after that. And then the third movement takes a bit from Our Town, the famous American play by Thornton Wilder, and the character of Emily, who's died tragically, spoiler alert, she's sort of looking back on the town, looking at the characters in the town and what's happening. And she dies young, so, you know, she's reflecting on how fast everything goes. So, you know, there's sort of a furious element of, you know, chaos and anger mixed with this really just sort of floating line. And you'll hear the amazing subtone capabilities of the tenor saxophone in that moment too. So we hope you'll enjoy this Ghost Dialogues by Lance Holm. thanks to everyone for being here. It really means a lot. This is a weird thing to get out of the habit of doing for a year. And even with the occasional gig here and there, recording something for church or something like that. Western Brass Quartet we played a couple weeks ago, which was great. There's a rhythm to doing this that you get used to after a while, and when it throws a wrench in the works, it's good to have a nice and friendly audience to sort of get our feet wet again. These last pieces are ones that were well known to my predecessor Steve Jones and my colleague Scott Thornburg. They played them on recitals frequently, and the first time I heard them, I was so struck by just how beautiful they were. They're really accessible and really they sort of play around with jazz harmonies and contemporary sounding popular music elements while not being trite, or derivative, which I like a lot. Being that the composer is Spanish, teaches at a conservatory in Cordova, the Andalusian thing is really big in his aesthetic, and he really brings those elements to bear, cross rhythms and all kinds of, sort of guitar-like moments. These pieces are a lot of fun to play. Each movement is dedicated to a friend, teacher, colleague of his, a musician that had an impact on him. And there's sort of, if you know Spanish, there's sort of some fun word games. The second movement, for example, is called Medianoche Circular, which means circular midnight, or if you're a jazz fan, round midnight, right? You're not going to hear any quotes of the tune in there, but there is sort of an evocation of the nighttime that's really beautiful. The third movement's an alborada, which you've probably seen that word in other pieces of music. It means like a morning, the morning call to prayer. And remember too that Andalusia is, has close proximity to the Arab part of the world, in the Middle East, and so the Islamic influence there is really strong. In the folk music, you can hear those elements sometimes. And then the last movement is called rondo, which means that it has a theme that comes back again and again and again. Rondo de la candela, so it means around the candle. Rondo around the candle. So I guess you're trying to dance fast enough to not set your pants on fire or something like that. We hope you enjoy these pieces by Santiago Baez Cervantes, and we really enjoyed playing for you tonight. Thank you for being here.